Hello, welcome to the Well After Hours. I'm Beverly Allen, and I'm so glad you gathered with us today to have conversation around the well. Our conversation today is about moving from pain to purpose with passion. And I'm so elated because the subject that we're going to be talking about is a sensitive one that I'm sure is relatable in a large fashion to our audience. And given some of the statistics that I have recently read, I'm sure it's going to be very relatable, especially in the United States, where it says every 92 seconds an American is sexually assaulted. And on the average, there are 321,500 victims ages 12 and older of rape and of sexual assault. Wow, that is quite alarming. And they say younger people are the highest risk of sexual violence. There are so many more statistics, and I have experts here that are going to inform you of so much more. But I'm so blessed to have at the Well After Hours two amazing women as my guests today who have shared a similar experience of pain, but they have taken that pain and redirected it to purpose with great passion. And I'm so glad to welcome Tomeca Robinson and Tomeycia Scott. Thank you for being with us today, and I'm just so happy that you're here.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
You know, there's a lot that I want to allow you all to tell your story because you share the same experience, and it's going to motivate and encourage so many women today. I mean, all of us are affected in one way or another. But I want to tell a little bit about what you all are doing because I'm so proud. And so these are two women of God who have faith and who are walking with the Lord Jesus Christ and are worshiping them. And they're going to be able to show you what God does for one, he can do for another. And so we're grateful. But I want to start off and talk about you. And to her daughter, the wonderful, affectionately called Diamond, she's currently a resident director in PA. And Diamond has gained a lot of personal experience in trauma at a young age. She uses her story as a victim to share how you can become victorious over your situation. Diamond enjoys sharing her story and via interactive speaking engagements. She's had the honor of being the student government president at the Cedar Crest All-Women's College, and she has also interned at the 2016 Democratic Convention. She's traveled to Guatemala to work with indigenous people, and she has traveled to Greece on an exploratory trip. Diamond graduated from Cedar Crest College with a degree in new media and film studies and is a force to be reckoned with. I second that. I want you to tell your story. Now, your daughter is young, and it's things happen to parents, and sometimes it also falls on children. Tell me your story before we get to Diamond, okay. What you would like to share.
So basically, after college, I met a gentleman, and we started dating, and I had a child out of wedlock, which is Diamond.
Gift.
Yeah, and she was a great gift, and basically that's why I named her Diamond. Like they say, diamonds is a girl's best friend. So basically I had Diamond, and I'm a mother that's very watchful. Things didn't work out with me and her dad, so the courts identified that he had to have weekend visitations, and so that's where everything happened. So with our story, I had visited my aunt's church in D.C. Never been to this church before in my life. And the pastor stopped the service when we walked in, and he said the Lord has a word for somebody in the church. So he was walking around, and he was just talking, and he said, I don't know who this word is for, but all the things that he was saying was things that was happening in my life. So my mom and my aunt started nudging me, saying, I think that he's talking about you. So basically, at some point when he was speaking, tears started coming down my eyes because I knew exactly that he was talking about nobody but me. And I was like, how could he know these things? But he still didn't know who it was for. So then he came on our side of the church, and he was in my area. And earlier he had asked if you needed anything from the Lord, would you, could you stand up? And I was one of the people standing, but because he was talking so long, I had sat down. So then he had asked me, he said, excuse me, ma'am. He said, were you standing earlier? And I said, yes, I was. And he said, well, do you mind standing again? And I said, okay. So I stood up, and then he asked me if I was a Christian, and I said, I consider myself a Christian. I may not pay my tithes like I should or pray as much as I should, but I consider myself a Christian. So then after that, he started really talking about the enemy, that God has some great things for me to do to help other people, but how I was going to go through some serious trials and tribulations, and how the enemy was trying to kill me personally. Wow. And I knew I was going through some things in my life, but I didn't know what else I was going to go through. And so when he started sharing the story, he just comes out of the blue and says, where's your daughter? My daughter was not with me. She was at her other grandmother's house. And so I said, well, she's not with me. She's at her other grandmother's house. And then he said, oh, she should be with you. And so he started saying how I'm supposed to be watching over her and things like that. And he just started sharing that, things that I was going to change my field of work. At the time, I was working at Prudential, and he said that I was going to go into the field of talking. He said that, asked me, was I looking for a house, which I was, but I wasn't working at the time. I just like to look at houses, and I was like, thinking like, if I bought a house, this is a house.
How we get, yeah.
Right, and so I had been going out looking, and so he said, the Lord said 30 days. 30 days you're going to be in your house, and he said, it's not our 30 days, but God will confirm when the 30 days is. Mm-hmm. And so I had started a new job, and 30 days on the job, I was signing my contract for my house. So
I tell you, God knows how to get a word to you, doesn't he? Oh,
yes,
my goodness.
And so we had visited the house several times, and when we went to sign the contract on the house, in the garage, it was a message written, and it said Matthew 5:16. And so we were just like, oh my goodness. So most of the things that this pastor was saying to me started coming to fruition. So he didn't tell me in detail what I was going to go through, but he said that I was going to go through some serious stuff, and it would make me like want to lose my mind. So,
wow.
Through my marriage, I was going through a lot of trials and tribulations. And, I was going to school to try to be a therapist, and it seemed like the closer I got to trying to be a therapist, the more struggle that came. And so I had a son, and my son, he was very, he was young when I started school. I want to say he was like 2 years old. Mm-hmm. And my daughter was very young. She's 6 years older than my son. So my daughter would spend the night over the weekends at her dad's. And one weekend that she was over there, she was sexually assaulted. One of the things that the gentleman said, he said that you and your daughter is going to do business together. Like, y'all gonna do something together. I don't know what it is. And he also said to me that, he said, whatever you guys do, he said, you're gonna be sharing your testimony and the way that God brought you out. And he said, millions of people will be saved by the way that you handled your situation.
Wow.
He also shared that we'll be traveling from state to state and country to country, helping people. And we just did our first.
Which you are doing.
Right, we just did our first event in the Bahamas for a mother-daughter cruise. So everything that he said is coming to fruition. It's like 20 years, 21 years later, but everything just like that. And it's like sometimes I've seen people be prophesied over, but I've never know like if the thing happened.
Exactly.
So it wasn't like I didn't believe him. I just didn't know. But in my heart of hearts, I could feel that the Lord took time to speak to me that day.
Wow.
And when you get that feeling, you know. It was like when I came home from work from DC that weekend, I just started packing up. One of my girlfriends that went to church with me was my roommate, and I told her about what was said, and I said, we need to pack this house because my lease is up in 30 days, and he said, I'm gonna be in my house in 30 days, and I believe in the Lord.
Wow. All right. Well, faith without works is dead, right? You were moving on faith.
Right. So on to the story with my daughter.
Can I ask you this? Was your husband ever abusive?
So with my husband, not her father, but my
Okay.
husband, that's my son's father.
Oh, okay.
My husband was emotionally abusive. Yeah. Like the things that he said and did, and I could tell that in his life when he was a child, because he had a lot of anxiety issues, that things like that happened to him. And at first, I didn't see these things because I was just like a lay person, but I went to school for counseling while I was married, and so that's kind of where the apple cart got shook up, because now I'm learning to be healthier and I'm seeing things that I don't normally see, and it just don't feel right in my spirit. And so so that's how things got shaken up. And even back to when I was telling you, my girlfriend that was living with me, my roommate at the time, and I told her that we were going to move. Actually, her husband killed her in a murder-suicide last year. So it's like all these things that this pastor said, that you're going to go through some horrible things in your life, but the way you deal with it, and even just today, it's still my voice and my chest, my heart is palpitation just to think about it, and missing her, thinking about what my daughter had to endure, everything that we had to go through. But you know what I say? I said, the devil done messed with the wrong person.
Oh, there you go.
Because this is how I feel. Now you done messed with my baby, so now you put me in a position that I'm forced to go ahead and help all these other mothers and fathers out here to protect their children.
Isn't that beautiful? I tell you, that holy boldness will stand up, won't it? It's like, oh, you want to fight? I got to fight for you now. I'm going to take the fight to you.
Right. So basically, anytime you see your child hurt, you want to do something. And at the time, I was working with teenage sex offenders. So I was in the field where I was a counselor helping to rehabilitate teenage sex offenders in a wilderness camp so that we can get them back integrated into society. And this happens to my daughter. So of course, I can't go to work. I'm to the point where I'm so depressed that I had to basically take a leave of absence. I wouldn't get up to just take care of my daily needs, brushing your teeth, just taking care of yourself, getting dressed and stuff like that. And I had a young son who I told you I had the baby. With my mom had to come from New Jersey because we were living in Georgia at the time, so that she can help me with the family because I just wasn't in no condition. But I did make sure we were seeing a Christian psychologist. So I did make sure that we went to all our appointments. That was like the only thing I would get up to do, because I thought it was to help my daughter. So I would get up and go to his appointments, and he had knew us beforehand because me and my husband had did marital counseling with him. So he knows how I normally dress, look, and stuff like that. So when he saw me coming to the
something was wrong. He's like, wait a minute.
He saw me coming to the office looking any kind of way. He was just like, wait a minute, we need to do something.
And that's awesome. I don't want you to lose your thought, but I was just thinking, because we've talked about that, about, like you say, you went to a Christian psychologist, a counselor who could talk to you, who knows the whole man, the spirit, soul, and body, and deal with you. People sometimes in the church are so resistant to professional counseling or to help, not understanding that these people know the science of how we were made up, how God created us, and how to, integrate even faith into it. So it's not like you just pray.
Right.
You have to get up and do something and take some steps, and God will help you, and he gives you the right people to help us. And so I'm glad you brought that out,
So there are people in the field that are Christians that incorporate that into their therapeutic sessions.
Yes. And that you were able to, you knew someone even beforehand. So it's great. Yeah.
So basically, while I was down one day, my daughter came into the room and she laid in the bed next to me. And she said, "Mommy, you know how you always help everybody else?" She said, "Why don't we help other kids like me? Why don't we tell what happened to me and help other kids, because other kids might have had this happen to them." And when she said that, it kind of it just gave me a purpose, you know what I'm saying? Because at that point in my life, I'm not even gonna lie to you.
Yes, I know.
I was mad at
God. I know. I say that. I'm glad you're being honest about it, because that's how you would feel. You're helping everybody else's children. God, how could you let this happen to my child?
And this is what I was saying. I was like, Lord, I'm sitting here working with the worst of the worst, every day walking these wilderness camps and working with these sex offenders and putting myself in the fire, doing restraints in the woods on the gravel and all this stuff.
Wow.
And I said, and this same population that I'm here to help, you would allow that to happen to my child? Why would you do that to me?
Wow.
I was angry.
Yes.
But then when my daughter said that, it was like, okay, if this is what you want, this is what we're gonna do. And immediately we started buying puppets. AmeriCorps made us a puppetry stage that we took out. And we would go to churches, YMCAs, anywhere that would have us.
Yes.
And we would do puppet shows. And so that's how I got my kids involved. So my kids, of course, kids like puppets.
Yes,
they were young.
Exactly.
My daughter was 9 when this incident happened.
Wow.
So,
and to think she came up with the idea, why don't we do something to help other people?
Right.
Wow, that says a lot. That says volumes, for not only for her at that time, how the Lord had equipped her and enabled her even to get through it at such a young age.
Right.
And that the child could help the parent. Because that's her feeling like that helped pull you out of it, because we go through guilt and everything, and the hurt and so many emotions, as a parent, like you said, as a mom, you hurt my baby, what, really?
And what happened too was just hearing things that people asked her. People would ask her, well, when this person approached you to do this, why didn't you do this? She's 9 years old.
Insensitive and
it just
not
made
knowledgeable.
me every day cringe.
Yeah.
And when we went back out into society, it was like, if we had somebody, we visited this church, and this particular pastor was a good pastor. We was visiting his church for a while, but he had the same name as this person. His name was so close to the person that did this to my daughter. It was hard. And then the church that we went to in Smyrna, Georgia, the person that did this to my daughter, he lived in Smyrna, so we was watching our back every time we went to church, and we felt like we couldn't even go to our church because we didn't know if he would be there or what would happen, you know?
Wow. This story is so amazing, and I know that while this is only a half-hour show, we're not ending it at this point. We're going to continue. There's going to be a part 2. Welcome back to the Well After Hours part 2 of Moving from Pain to Great Purpose with Passion with my guest, Tomeco Robinson and Tomeycia Scott. We're going to pick up where we left off.
Iman had came to me and she asked me about starting a business. So it woke something up in me, and I said, if this is what what it's going to take for my baby to get well, then this is what I'm going to do. And so basically, we started buying puppets. AmeriCorps made us a puppetry art stage, and we got funding, like a grant from United Way for the most creative idea for the community. Wow. And that's how we started it, with a very small grant and just local people helping us out. We had people in our community that helped us with self-defense to teach kids. Beautiful. We did something for Rad Kids. I got certified in Rad Kids to teach kids how to do self-defense and how to get away from a predator. We had the detectives for this sex assault unit come out when we spoke, and other friends and family members would come out and share their stories as well. And we would actually print out pictures of sex offenders in the neighborhoods that we were doing our speaking engagements in, and we would categorize them. So we would let people know that even though this person is identified as a sex offender, really their offense is that they had sex with somebody that was a year or younger than them. So we tried to educate the community so that they wouldn't think.
Because when you hear sex offender, you just think blanket, just like, you know.
And so I think God had put me in a funny, awkward situation, because I had been a counselor for sex offenders. So before this had happened to my daughter, I was put in a position where I was able to start seeing from their side and their family's point of view. So I didn't want people to be confused, because I wouldn't want a family member of mine to be accused of something like this.
Yes.
And this is really not the true situation. But I also wanted people that were actually real sex offenders to be, get the fate that was for them.
Yes, absolutely.
And so this whole situation, we helped in the community, and we had kids come to us and say, well, that happened to me when I was in Sunday school, or that happened to me when I was at school, or that happened to me. So it started a situation where people could come out and speak to us, and then people in our community knew who we were and what we did, so they would ask us to come. They would tell us about families that needed our assistance, and me and Diamond would go to the home. I would speak with the parent. Diamond would basically play with the child and kind of talk to them when she was young, and then we would bring them together to talk about what happened, so that they would feel safe, and that they shouldn't be ashamed. You didn't do anything wrong.
Absolutely.
And family members would tell us, we were walking on pins and needles until you guys came, because we didn't know how to talk to our child about this situation, and our child didn't feel comfortable talking to us. But now that they realize that there's other people out there that this has happened to them, and that they're not afraid to share their story. Now my child is coming telling me things that I didn't even know. So it now makes me aware of other things that I should have been aware of in the first place. So basically educating our community and stuff like that.
Which is fantastic. This is with the Me Too movement and all these. Now people say, oh, they're coming out of the woodwork. That's because they've had to be silent for so many years, because of the stigma, because of the shame, because of guilt. And so thank God, that the work that you're doing to help, because there's still a lot of people who are still stuck in that place.
Yes.
And so I can't can't wait to have Diamond share your story and how you felt, because I look at you now, such a beautiful young woman, healthy, you know what I mean, mentally and emotionally. At 12, I can't even imagine that at that young age that you were saying, 9 years old, and to be able to say, Mommy, why don't we help other children? Isn't it something how children communicate? They have such a heart that when they hurt, they So, I mean, like getting from there to where you are now, what's been the journey for you?
So it has been a very long process, but it has, and a process that I'm honestly still continuing to go through. So my mother mentioned that I was 9 years old. What she didn't say is that my perpetrator was actually 18, so double my age. And it was someone that I didn't know. A lot of times they say it's someone that the person may be familiar with, someone that I had only met one other time. But in the urban community, we often say, oh, we will relate to, even if we barely know them, like, oh, that's our cousin, that's my So it was someone who we kind of jokingly was like, oh yeah, well, like we're family, even though like we definitely weren't related. So I'm very aware and observant. Even when I was young, I've always been that way. So it kind of started out with him just trying to play with us at like when we were playing basketball. Now, it was a lot of young kids playing basketball and this older guy just trying to inch his way in. So him and his mother ended up staying that night. It was my sister's graduation party. She was graduating from high school. No, sorry, maybe college, high school, college, I don't remember. But it was her graduation party. I remember that, and during the summer, and the guy ended up spending a night, but it was like they have a 2-story house, so it was like adults were mostly upstairs and then children were kind of like downstairs in the playroom and everything. So that's kind of when it happened. And there was a guy who I grew up who lived near my dad's house, and we were very close. He was my age, and he was one of my best friends. And unfortunately, he had to experience that with me. So he wasn't necessarily sexually abused himself, but he saw everything that happened to me.
Oh my goodness!
And so him being there, and then the guy still stayed the night. It wasn't until, I want to say this happened Friday night, and I stayed the full weekend, and I knew that if I told my father that he would honestly try to kill the guy.
Him. I know.
So
exactly, and they count on that. They count on that. They know that,
Yeah, so that's why I was like, I did not know who to go to. And I was like, my mom's not here. I didn't feel comfortable telling my stepsister or my stepmom. So I kind of just held it to myself the whole weekend until I got back to my mom. As soon as I got in the car with my mom, and my mom, she knows her children. Of course, all parents do. And she could tell something was wrong with me. And all she had to say was, Diamond, what happened? Diamond, what's wrong? And I broke down crying in the car and just told her what happened. My dad, because they used to meet up at this gas station. My dad had went into the gas station to get like some snacks before we had left, and I remember him coming out still not knowing. My mom had told him, and he just got so frustrated he literally started hitting the stop sign and busted his knuckles and everything. So my mom was in a good place. She was like, even though it's been a couple of days, we need to get you to the hospital. We need to get all these tests done and everything. But she was, like she said, she was very frantic. Like she was distraught,
Yes,
like how is she supposed to react? So I'm thankful that she was even, aware, like, okay, let's go to the hospital now.
Yes.
My dad, I feel like he was upset with me for not telling him or not saying anything, but I knew, like deep down, I knew.
Yes, you know what would happen.
And I felt like I couldn't necessarily live with that.
Yes, exactly.
So I was like going through all this and then that. So not only did I have to experience it firsthand, it felt like after going through like the court system and everything, I had to almost relive it each and
over
every time. Because of course everyone wants you to tell this story.
Of course, yes.
I remember there was a time when I was in a room with I guess one of the detectives, and they had literally brought out sheets of paper with like kind of like a male body and a female body, but it was like a drawing, and it was like point to where he touched you at, point to like different things that he did, and very detailed. And I feel like that was almost as traumatic, or not more, like maybe even more traumatic, having to go through it, reliving it through the courts.
Yes, wow. I've heard many, sexual survivors, assault survivors say that.
Right. Yes, it's tough. But the other thing that I would say is, even after that, he did end up going to prison for only 5 years, but still something. Sometimes people, they don't get anything.
Yes, yes.
But when that 5th year came around, I remember, and honestly, even throughout that time, being so anxious, so nervous, like my mom said, not even be able to walk outside, always feeling like I'm being watched or someone's following me. So it was very hard in that sense. And after everything happened to me, I didn't think that relationships for me would ever be the same. Like, I didn't think I would be able to have an actual normal relationship with someone, or that I would even have sex,
Right, yes.
So it's like, these are some things I felt like would not be something for me, that would not be possible later on in life. I was in counseling, and I'm glad that my mom is not someone who does not believe in counseling.
Yes.
She's a counselor herself.
Absolutely.
So that really did help me.
Yes.
And it's something that even throughout life I continue to always go and always encourage people to go, because it's someone other than like a family member or a friend who doesn't really have that emotional or connection
attachment. Yes.
So them giving you honest feedback, and the professionals.
Yes.
So, but I'd say that's the hardest thing. So I have come to terms now that even though it's tough for me to come to certain things or to talk about my story, it's very important. And I'll just kind of quickly say something about me being a resident director. I work at a community college, Northampton Community College in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And for our RAs, we train them. And one of the trainings that they go through is a bystander training, which is quite literally something where they learn about a lot of different sexual assault cases that happen on college campuses. And at the end of that, we do a exercise with them that makes it very real and personal for them. And after the exercise, they are able to share stories if they want to. And this past year, we just started the school year. This past year when we were in training, literally I feel like by the end of the training, everyone was crying and sobbing. We had to bring in a counselor because we just wanted to make sure it's okay. And then afterwards, because we didn't want them to quit, we took them for Rita. It was like, let's just make sure you guys are okay. But I think from being in that and just hearing how many people go through, our staff is predominantly females, but even the 5 or so men that we have, they were also, even if they didn't decide to share their story, they resonated with it. And some of the people, their stories were just so traumatizing. So it's like, I don't know. It's
a
tough.
Traumatic experience, And those pictures sometimes never stop playing, And but tell me, how does your faith, the part now? We know the professional and the psychological, but you had a Christian counselor. How did that help? How did that add?
Well, for me, it really helped. For one, I went to a church in Smyrna, Georgia called High Point Christian Tabernacle. And when I say I had an awesome support system, at that church, they have what they call care leaders. So because the church was getting much bigger, everybody can't have access to the pastors. So they have these care leaders. Absolutely. And the care leaders go by what your last name is. So maybe I would be the care leader for people from A to D last names. So the care leaders would put on monthly events, or they would connect with another care leader, and they would compete with them for different things so that people in the church would get to know each other. And we would stay connected like a family. So I had an awesome care group leader. Her name was Beverly Kennedy. She would call and check up on me. I was one of the members that was at the church for a long time. So for me, I had access to my pastors. When this incident happened, I was able to call them on the telephone. The pastor prayed for us. He spoke with my husband, gave him direction, things like that. So I think that having the support from and background from your church, but for me, I had to go on my faith, because sometimes when I went to church, like now I felt different. I felt like everybody knew our situation or our story, and now because I have these insecurities and these trust issues, it's like I felt so distant.
Yes,
it wasn't
yes.
like people was not trying to reach out or to help.
But you would be withdrawn as a result of that, because that is a trust issue.
Right,
it is a trust issue.
And then also for us, like, people don't understand when something like this happens in the family, it actually breaks things down. Me and her father already didn't have the best relationship. And I really didn't want her going over there anyway.
Yeah.
So after this incident,
I
was like, no, she's not going over there. So basically, it brought up another court situation where I kept her away. Well, I said that she can go visit, but the psychologist basically said that allowing her to go back in the home now would be re-traumatizing, going back in that area. So initially he started, like, him and his family would go to the hotel for the weekend and be with her, but then he said it was too expensive, so he started back taking her in that environment, and she wasn't ready, and I could see when she came home some of the signs, and so I stopped letting her go over there. So then we had this huge court battle,
and he didn't understand that.
And that's the thing. It's like, I guess too, for him, when I did notice, it appeared that he started drinking more. Like, this started having an effect on him too.
Guilt.
Because I can say I know her father loves her.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Does he make the best decisions? No. But what parent does? I don't always make the best decisions. So, but it caused something totally different to happen. And I was really shocked that he did do the court thing against us. So we went to court, and during the court time, that was the time my father was battling with cancer, and I was getting ready to go to New Jersey, and I went to court, and I ended up getting locked up because I didn't let her go to her dad's house. And
for trying to protect your daughter.
Right.
What do you do when your daughter says, "Mommy, I don't want to go"?
Right.
It's like I'd rather go to jail than to let her go.
The judge basically said, so you're going to choose to listen to the psychologist over me for this court order? And so, you have the documentation saying that she's diagnosed with PTSD.
Yes.
You know what happened to her. You know where it happened at. Like, common sense should, I would think, kick in at some point.
And you know what? It's even more, you would think professionally that he would have had enough experience with psychologists to understand what post-traumatic syndrome is for a child. Especially in that. Like, you have to be insensitive. Why wouldn't you rule in her favor? At this point now, it's not the father
Right, the
that you
child should
can't. You should be worried about. You should be worried about the child. You know, she was already in his care, and this
Right.
happened, and now she's got to face like going the same.
A
they say-
lifetime
yeah.
of-
So you want her to go back. You don't even want to give her time. You should tell the dad, listen, you can have visits, but you have to come where she is.
Right,
You
right.
know. So I don't that they're not trained. Maybe now, maybe some of them are more. I don't know, but. At the expense of the child is always come first. You put a mother in jail if the mother doesn't put the child first, and here you are being put in jail because you did put her first and her
And
feelings.
that particular judge was actually rated, I think, the third worst judge in the entire country, and she was known to favor for the male side and not for mothers. So.
Wow. So, yeah, you know what? There are people who sit in high places, but you don't know what their life experiences have been that have
Right.
kind of designed their thoughts, their thinking process. So obviously there was a problem there. I don't know whether
Right.
she was a mom or what, or actually bonded with any of her children that you would not, because that's just motherly instinct.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Even like when they were locking me up, like some of the deputies, they were crying, they were in tears because
They understood.
It was as if I was a criminal, and literally they had to like chain me, like my legs, like I had my heels on and everything, and they
Are
had
you
to put
kidding
the
me?
chains on
Just
my.
you would have walked there and said, "Listen, you don't need. I don't need a muzzle. Just let me walk. Direct me to what cell." And
Right, so they had to. So leaving
my
the court,
goodness.
they had to put me the chains on my legs and on my hands behind my back and the chains on my waist. And then when we got downstairs, it was like a van with a bunch of other women
that
that
you
were
had to
in
get in.
prison.
Oh, my
And so I had to get in, and they had to attach me to the other women. And so when we got to the jail, people were saying, "Are you an attorney? Did they lock up an attorney?"
I know you come in there dressed to the nines. Articulate, educated, and then they put, oh my goodness.
But going back to what you said about your faith, so when I got in the jail, it was late that night, and then the next morning I wake up. So we were on these bunks, and the lady above me on the bunk was a pastor's daughter.
Oh my goodness.
And so we ended up praying and doing praise and worship in the jail.
What? Oh my goodness. And what was she in for?
She had been drinking, and she had just stopped her car in a parking lot because she knows she had drunk too much. So she fell asleep behind the wheel, and the police officer came and knocked on the car door, and they asked her why she had stopped, and she said, because I was drinking too much and I shouldn't be driving. And they said, but because you're behind the wheel of the car, had you been sitting on the other side asleep, we wouldn't have to take you in, but because you've been behind the wheel of the car, we have to take you in. So just to see all these things and to have that experience. And it's funny because while I was there, a client that I had just did an assessment on for counseling, she came in and she saw me, and so then everybody figured out that I was like a counselor. So they was like, "Hey doc," and it was like everybody was all sitting around my bunk, and
Patience right there in the. But you know what? Isn't that something? Because I understand that there are people in prison who, a lot of them are there, who have been sexually assaulted before they got to prison, but are also being sexually assaulted within the prison system. So there's so much a need for counseling and understanding. People need to be missed just because they're criminals, and people are criminals oftentimes because of the experiences that they've had that have turned them into different, like they say, hurting people hurt people. So that's amazing. But I'm glad you two haven't lost sight of your faith, that you still continue to trust in God, because we're not promised that, well, sin is innate in man, and there are different things that bring it out that cause men to sin, and we can be the victims of other people's, demented thinking, and but we still hold on to the faith that God is able to do all things.
Always, always.
He's able to heal, he's able to deliver, and he takes us on a journey and brings it for a greater purpose. I mean, he can use it. He didn't say it would be good. He said he'll cause things to work together for good. Not that they would be good, but the end result is that he'll use it for good. And look at how many people that you all are blessing by what you do. But tell us quickly a little bit about the foundation that you've established.
So basically, initially it started in Georgia, and it was called Jesus Crew Diamonds. And so that's when we did the puppetry arts, and we would go around and we had our community, everybody in our community set up to help their own community.
Oh, nice.
So here we are actually just starting. It's just been a couple of months since we decided to reinvent ourselves. What they say, reintroducing ourselves.
All right, I heard about that relaunch.
Allow me to reintroduce
myself. All right. How wonderful. And that pretty nice bag that you have there with us.
We brought this bag as a thank you for allowing us to be on your show.
Oh my goodness, I'm so honored that
my son actually made in his graphic arts class.
Beautiful.
And because we feel like our business should be a family affair, that everyone is affected by sexual assault. When one person in your family is affected, it affects everyone. So it's a problem, not just for me, but it's a problem for my son, my husband, the cousins, and everybody, because now we're all put in a position where we have to support her for the rest of her life, and we're got to support anybody else that this happens to. And we also especially have to support the little ones that's growing up that's not even aware that something like this could happen. See, Diamond happened to be special in her area because she had a mother that worked with sex offenders that told her things like this. If anybody ever tried to do this to you, I was very clear with her that this is not what is normal. So if something like this ever happens to you, you need to tell me right away. Whereas a lot of times people are afraid, they don't know how to talk to their children about stuff like that. So this is what we do. We help people, and we go out and we talk to kids and we talk to teenagers and we talk to families about all of this. We go to churches and stuff like that because sometimes it's taboo to talk about sexual assault and domestic violence in the church.
Unfortunately. But yeah, and you bring out another point. I think like the church that you were going to that had all those different resources, that we need to start thinking. We have auxiliaries, but we need to bring in some resources to help people, because life is real, and even the word is applicable. It should be applicable to everyday life, you know, because the Bible deals with every situation. If you read about, David, who Absalom killed his stepbrother because of what he did to his sister. You know, I mean, there's stories, everything is in there that deals with everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and shows how, how we humanly deal with things, but how God would have us to deal with things, So it's not as though, this is far from the church, and we should know that, and I'm praying and hoping, even by exposing you two to this and showing what the church can do, that there's a lot the church can do, and there are a lot more people that are in the church that can function, and I hope that will help other people, besides, I love conferences and I love prayer gatherings and things like that, but there are other things that we can also do along with the prayer and along with the conferences to help many of the women, because you can almost go down a pew and like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, it's like how many women have been affected by this, and still need some practical solutions.
Yeah, and also if you think about it in the other area, because I never really thought about it like this until somebody approached me. They were like, well, do you do trainings for like pastors and the pastors, committees and stuff like that? And I was like, well, we could do something like that, but I was thinking about that it was to teach them how to teach people in the church, but they were saying, no, we've had some incidences at our church with some of the leaders. Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah,
it's true.
Some of the leaders that we don't know how to handle.
Right.
And so we need somebody that can come and speak on this, what the right thing and
The
wrong
wrong thing is to do.
and I
Isn't
was
it
just
something?
like, wow, so these are leaders in your church?
Yeah, people, and they shouldn't be leaders after that. I mean, they should get help.
But if you look
Taken
at what's
down.
happened in the Catholic community,
I know, and it's been happening for years.
right?
Years. Goes
And people
way, way
going
back.
without, like, because of that, the way that community set up, going without even being,
Acknowledged or
yeah, it's
right,
not
and just
even
talked about.
Yeah,
Yep,
it's just
not
covered
talked
up.
about.
It's not even going through the jail process or the court
No.
process, the procedures or something like that. It's a whole different system.
Yeah.
How could
It's
we
reached
get
all the way up to the Pope. I mean, to
Right.
tell them that he has to intervene almost at different times and make
Right.
judgments. It's something. Yeah, it is. It's so spread so far. Widespread all over. There's no denomination religiously
Right,
that
none.
hasn't been affected by it.
None.
There's none. I want to close out this part 2 segment with some encouragement from both Tomeycia and Diamond to our viewers today. What you could say to them, to someone who may have been that, to a mom who may be in that, have had experience what you experienced, with her daughter or child, and Diamond as the child who is going to. You can talk to other young women or young women or young men who have gone through it, that to show that you can get through it. That you take time to.
Okay, I'll just first start with saying that it's possible for you to overcome this. I feel like even though we go through such rough times, like God would not allow us to go through certain things if he didn't have a way out for us. So you can do it. It's gonna be hard. It's not an easy task, but you can get through it with help. This is what we're here for, and we will be putting information out for other resources, and we'll probably be coming up with some trainings within the next year, but we are here to support our community. And when I say our community, it's not
That's all right.
it's not just the community of African Americans. It's the community of people. We're on earth here to help one another.
Very good. Thank you. And Diamond.
So the one thing that I would say, kind of piggybacking off of what she's saying, is you have help. I know some people may not have direct support from family members, but there's plenty of hotlines, plenty of organizations out there that if you are going through, or if you know someone who is going through, please reach out. We're in such a bad time for mental health right now, where suicide is so detrimentally high. So just remembering that you have help, you have support. Yes, it is tough, but the Lord will never leave you nor forsake you, and he is by your side the whole time. He will get you through.
Thank you so much. On that note, we'll end the Well After Hours and thank our viewing audience for being with us. Remember again, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m., come gather with us around the Well After Hours. Thank you. God bless you.
Bye.